If you want the highest possible credit score, you're going to want to know this. In today's video, I'm going to show you everything that you need to know about trade lines, how many you need, and the best strategies to boost your score. What's up, winners? My name is Nam. If you're new here, welcome. Here we talk all things personal finance and credit. Start out by subscribing so you don't miss out on any future videos. So first off, let's talk about what exactly is a trade line. I think a lot of people heard of this term before, especially if they are looking to build credit or repair their own credit. But essentially, what a trade line is any type of account that appears on your credit report. While there can be additional information that appears on your credit report that is not considered a trade line, such as collections, hard inquiries, bankruptcies, judgments, and things of the sort. So in general, there are three types of trade lines. So let's go over each one of them. The first one that we will be talking about is probably what you're most familiar with when it comes to credit, which is a revolving account. A revolving account or trade line is a type of account where the balance changes. So this includes unsecured credit cards, which requires no security deposit, secured credit cards, which does, other lines of credit such as bank lines of credit, store credit, HELOCs, and things that are similar. Each revolving account reports information that affects your credit differently, some way more than others, but in a nutshell, what is reported from revolving accounts is when the account was opened. This affects your length of credit history, which is about 15%. Next is your payment history, which affects your payment history portion of your credit score, which is 35%. Next would be your credit limit, which is used to calculate the available credit that you have. And the last key feature is your balance, which is the one main contributors of credit utilization. This is what sets revolving accounts from other types of trade lines. To get your credit utilization is by comparing your balance to your credit limit. So of the 5 parts that affect your credit, the amounts owed portion plays about 30% of that. All this means is that the amount of debt that you have reported. What people always get mixed up is that not only credit utilization from one credit card affects your credit score, but so does your overall credit utilization. So for example, if you have a $500 balance on a credit card and it has a $1,000 credit limit, that card by itself has a credit utilization of 50%. But if you have another credit card that has a $1,000 credit limit, but there's no balance, if you were to add up all of your balances and credit limits, this will mean that you have an overall utilization of 25%. With FICO and other scoring models, they will take both of those instances into the calculation as well, because they take into account the amounts owed on all accounts, the amounts owed on different types of accounts, and how many accounts that have balances. So before moving on, let's talk about today's video sponsor, Aura. We do everything online. Aura helps you do this safely by protecting your data from hackers, scammers, and spammers. Aura continuously monitors the dark web, looking for emails, passwords, and social security numbers, and sends alerts fast to your phone or email when they find anything. After signing up with Aura, they found 47 places where my emails and passwords were shared on the dark web. Now, that's insane. We all know the importance of credit. Aura also gives you real-time alerts on suspicious credit inquiries, like if someone is trying to open a loan or a credit card in your name. Additionally, they automatically send requests on your behalf to data brokers to remove your information to help reduce the amount of spam and robocalls that you receive. Identity theft is so common that there are new victims every 14 seconds. It costs the average victim over $1,000. Protect your family and yourself from identity theft at aura.com/nam, also linked down in the description. And if you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link so you can see for yourself how many times Aura finds you or your family members' personal info on the dark web. Now moving on to the next type of trade line that goes onto your credit report are installment loans. This includes credit builder loans, auto loans, mortgages, personal loans, and student loans. Some of the type of loans that are not reported on your credit report could be labeled as something different, such as title loans, payday loans, and possibly buy now, pay later loans, such as Affirm or Klarna. Now, this is how installment lines of credit report on your credit report and how it affects you. It will report the account opening date, which will impact your length of credit history, your payment history, which is your payment history of your credit score, and the most important, which is the original loan amount and the current balance. This affects the amount owed portion of your credit score. Installment lines of credit is probably one of the biggest factors in your credit mix portion of your credit score. I see a lot of people have credit cards, but they don't have any current installment loan history on the report. So for that reason, this may not break them into the 800 levels. To see how that's possible, if you were to think about it, credit scores are typically between 300 to 850. That's a 550 point range. Since credit mix makes up 10% of your credit score, this will equal to 55 points. If you were to have no credit diversity whatsoever, then your score will be in the high 700s. Now that's only if you have perfect scores in other factors, which is very unlikely, but what I've seen working with hundreds of clients is that you need to have some sort of installment line of credit on your credit report to have the highest possible score. Your credit score tends to be the highest when you have an installment line of credit that's almost paid off. And once this line of credit gets paid off, that account becomes closed. And then you tend to see a drop in your credit score. So the only way to get it back up again is by getting another loan, which is kind of crazy to think about because you have to stay in debt to get a high credit score. So here's a personal story that I have. Earlier this year, I had a lease that was finishing. So as soon as I paid that off, my credit score dropped about 30 points. I was interested in buying a new car, so once that happened, I got a loan for it. In a month or two, my credit score jumped up again to back where it once was. Now, I understand that getting an 800 plus credit score is the ultimate flex for some of you guys out there, but the reality is, no one really needs an 800 plus credit score. For the majority of lending that you will need throughout your lifetime, having a credit score around the 740 range would typically qualify you for Tier 1 credit, which gives you the best possible rates just based on your credit score. Now, there are different factors that go into underwriting, which is the process of getting loans and credit, such as your debt to income ratio, how much money you make, and amongst other factors. Your credit score is just a piece of the puzzle. Now, the third trade line that you have to be aware of is that there will be trade lines that will not fall under revolving or installment lines of credit. These type of credit lines will be labeled as other on your credit report. Now, the most common ones that may be labeled as other would be rental history, utility payments, cell phone payments, just to name a few. But the thing about these accounts is that they aren't usually added on your credit report unless there's some sort of negative information or delinquency. Since rental history is one of those accounts, it's usually not reported to the credit bureaus because the landlords are not required to report this information, but there are some landlords that do and third-party services that allow you to do so. One example of a third party that allows to do this is called BoomPay. For about $2 a month, they report ongoing rental payments. Plus, if you want the past 24 months of rental payments reported, it will only cost you $25. Same go with utilities. So if your electricity bill, gas, water, and anything of the sort usually only gets reported by a third-party reporting agency. The most common one that people use absolutely for free is Experian Boost, because they report utilities and other trade lines such as internet and streaming services to your credit report. And this is 100% free, but the only downside is that it only benefits your Experian credit score. But I don't even really see this that much of a downside since a lot of lenders and credit card companies tend to look at your Experian credit score the most. Now, the two type of ways that these types of other trade lines affect your score is by affecting your length of credit history and your payment history. Because they technically do not have a credit limit or a starting balance, this does not impact your amounts owed portion of your credit score. Now that you know the three types of trade lines that can help you out with your credit score, let's go a little bit deeper and talk about the main differences between a primary trade line and an authorized user account. So a primary trade line is what it sounds like. It's an account that's in your name, meaning that you are the person who applied for this account using your social security number. This also includes accounts where you are the joint holder, like a co-signer on a car loan. On the other hand, authorized user accounts are where you get added as a person who is now responsible for that account, meaning that you can use this account, but you're not liable for any of the payments. So for example, let's just say that I open up a credit card for my son. He decides to spend $500 on a new PlayStation 4. Even though he charged a PlayStation 4 on that credit card, he is now responsible to pay off that account. It will be mine since I am the main account holder. That's why you gotta be very careful on who you add on as an authorized user, because at the end of the day, the main account holder is a person who technically would have to pay off that account even though they did not make any charges on it. The thing that you have to keep in mind is that there are some big differences on how primary trade lines and authorized user accounts affect your credit score. First off, primary accounts weigh more heavily on your credit score compared to authorized users. These are the accounts that impact every aspect of your credit, and these are always included in your credit score when it is being calculated. Now, on the other hand, authorized user accounts have less of an impact on your credit score. They often only impact payment history, credit utilization, and length of credit history, and sometimes they're even excluded when your score is calculated. Typically, whenever you look for larger amounts of credit, such as mortgages or auto loans, a lot of underwriters, they tend to look at how your personal credit is doing compared to authorized user accounts. Now, this brings me on to my next point. Is it worth buying trade lines? If you ever heard of anybody talking about this, this is when you just buy a slot in another person's credit card account. Essentially, you're just getting added on as an authorized user. You might have heard about seasoned trade lines. I'm not talking about spices here. This just means that they are old. The older, the better. you would also want to be on an account that has a very high credit limit. While this practice is not illegal, it may help you out in the short term, but also depending on the type of lending that you are seeking, it may or may not even help because a lot of financial institutions are looking past authorized user accounts when it comes to making their decision. Now, if you're in the market to buy or invest into something that would help build your credit, I would suggest getting primary trade lines such as credit builder accounts, secured credit cards, or something very similar that requires a small initial investment. I do have some recommendations down in the description below. Now, to continue our conversation about trade lines, you may be thinking about how many of these trade lines do I actually need to have to maximize my credit score? Now, I'm gonna be completely honest. There is no exact number that I can tell you or you can find anywhere that'll tell you, hey, if you get X amount of trade lines, you will have a perfect credit score. So this is gonna be based on my own professional experience plus hours of research on this particular topic. Ideally, you would want to have at least a few credit cards. This can be anywhere between 3 to 5 credit cards and at least one open installment line of credit. Now, with those credit cards, you would want to have them open and active as long as possible, because the older that they are, the more of the payment history would be beneficial. Now, ideally, you would want to have your credit cards that has been open for 7 years or longer. The reason being is that only 7 years of your credit information will play a factor whenever you apply for new lines of credit. Because if you ever had any late payments or delinquencies, it takes 7 years for that negative information to fall off of your report. So the longer that you have your credit cards open for, this is also known as average age of accounts. So the older that this number is, the better your credit score will be. Now, just because you have more or less credit cards than what I suggest, this does not necessarily mean that you will not have a great credit score or something that's above 740. The thing is that once you open up so many credit cards, this will lower your average age of accounts. Your average age of accounts only factors in 15% of your overall score, but every percentage does count, especially if you are in the lower good to fair credit range. Even if you had a couple newer credit cards, but also have older credit cards, this will tend to balance out and you will still have a pretty decent credit score. Now, when it comes to installment lines of credit, as I mentioned before, it is best to have a loan that's open and in good standing, because once an installment lines of credit closes, this will no longer report, which will lower your credit score. So if you have no active loans whatsoever, such as a mortgage, car loan, student loan, then I would suggest opening up a credit builder account because the majority of the time, these are very low cost and sometimes they are free. And this type of account will keep your credit score in a much higher range. All right, so now I want to turn it over to you. Let me know in the comments below of how many of these trade lines that you currently have. And if you want to hang out with me some more and learn more about the best credit building tips and tricks, come check out these videos over here.